Welcome to the Investor Agent Podcast. I'm Steve Seymour, your host, where we help transform the human mindset from scarcity and lack to abundance and wealth, one conversation at a time. Hey guys, Steve Seymour with the Investors Agent Podcast. Today we have a special guest, Omni Casey. Thank you for being on today.
Super excited. Thanks for the invite.
And Omni just presented at our real estate office here in Westchester. We have a collaborative agent event. It was an amazing event. Thank you so much for sharing all your knowledge, really coming from a place of contribution, making a difference in the world, and I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Great event. You had a packed room, office, and it's tough for us to do this right after, right? We got our energy at a peak here, and now we're like, man, we're drained, but I'm excited about our discussion here today.
Yeah, I really want to dive into, versus go into all your backstory. Like I know we'll put some links out there to get everyone to your site and really understand how you got into real estate. I really like where at the heart of what you speak about, which is making a difference in the world. And I want to dive right into that because too much we get lost in the how-to and not the why. And I really just want to understand more about how you see that and then, progressing with you and the impact that you've had and the goals that you have in terms of continuing that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. This is, if my 5 years ago, that self heard me ask people, what are you going to do to change the world? I'd probably roll my eyes, right? That's not who I was always. But now every time I speak, every time I run my own, education event, that's one of the questions I ask every person that comes to the room. They need to sit down and think about, if you're financially free. No, when you're financially free, what are you going to do to change the world? And most people never think about that their entire life, right? So we force them to think about it, and those answers change, right? Some people want to build a hospital, in a third world country. Some people want to help their family get out of poverty. Some people want to, live a better life and take their community with them. But really, we don't have the space to think about that enough. And it really comes down to that financial freedom or the burden of not being financially free, right? We need to have a job. We need to pay our expenses and pay our bills. That's a lot. Most people, that's more than enough to consume your life. And, if you say, I'm going to buckle down and hit financial freedom in 5 years or 7 years or 10 years or whatever it is, knowing that it's going to be a lot, but so that I can get to the other side and have space to breathe and then think about what am I going to do to change the world there. So it's an interesting thought process. Not to say people don't try to change the world before they're financially free. You can absolutely do that, but most people never have that ability to actually take action on that. So that's really my message, right? What's the why behind you wanting to make more money, wanting to become wealthy, wanting to buy real estate? There needs to be a bigger why, because at some point you're going to run into obstacles, and without that bigger why, you just give up.
Yeah, that's really what I was alluding to as well. I mean, I think it's such an amazing thing to be able to free people, right? That's really what you're doing, is you're freeing who they are as a person in terms of what matters most to them and who they can be in the world, making an impact. With that said, once that why is so clearly defined, that becomes such a compelling future for you to take steps and go over the obstacles. And when you hit a wall, you don't just stop. You knock it down or go around it. And I just I like the way you position that for our community today, and could really see how you broke it down in simple steps for people to see achievable action steps over a period of time that is very realistic to that financial freedom. I want you to share a little bit about how you break your life down in decades, and just talk a little bit about that, because it's such a simple concept, but it's really a powerful one for everyone to take a look at where they're at and where they're going.
Yeah, from an early age, I started at 21-ish or so, in real estate investing, real estate, agent as well, became a broker, and I couldn't see an end to that. And so for whatever reason, I just said, I'm going to give myself goals, and 30 seemed like such a far off number for me. When I'm 30, I'm going to be an old man ready to retire. So I just said I needed to be financially free by that time. And so financial freedom was my obsession in my 20s. And through being a real estate agent, I made a lot of money doing that, but that wasn't financial freedom. That was active income. And so finding the right mentors, coaches, and masterminds to kind of surround myself, similar to what you have built here, to be able to become a more educated and a better investor for passive income. That's what I knew I needed. I needed passive income to be able to say, that is my income. Even if I stop selling real estate or I don't have another active income after that, what's going to sustain my lifestyle? And so my 20s were about financial freedom. My 30s, I got married, I started to have kids. I have 3 beautiful kids. That changes your perspective, right? In life. I'm like, man, it's not just about me anymore. And so it became more generational wealth beyond just my needs and my means. I have a bigger purpose, and that was my family. And so my 30s became more generational wealth focused, and my investing strategy shifted a little bit because of that, and just hit 40 last year. And I like to say I kill myself off every decade. So whatever I'm doing, whatever business I'm building, I need to, by the end of that decade, be able to step back from it. Like, not, sometimes I step back and I'm still somewhat involved, or sometimes I step back and I'm not involved at all, but I need to have an end point. And so that allowed me to do that. And I did that as well. I was a broker. I ran a brokerage similar to you, about 100 agents, very, very investor focused. And I love that. I probably would do that for the rest of my life because it's something I really, really enjoyed. But I set the mandate of I need to exit at some point because I need to find someone to take my place, to continue what we've built, that it's going to make an impact that I wanted it to make, but I need to step back and think bigger. And I can't do that if I'm still doing that vision or mission that I started with. So that forced me to do that. And now I'm in the legacy generational wealth. How do I build that? How do I figure out how to make an impact? And decision that I make now is based on, is it going to leave a legacy or is it going to make an impact on a bigger scale?
Yeah, I love that. So, what I hear in this is, as you progress as a human being, these decades, right? 10 years of your life. And it's like, what is worth your time? And at first it was just to get financially free for myself, right? And then the second thing was family. It expanded other people around me, my tight, the people that are really matter most to me. And then it expands even bigger, like beyond just your family, but how can you make a difference in the world with other people? How can you help other people get to that? And that's been my journey as well, very similar timelines as well. But I think that, why I resonate so much with that message is because our vision and mission is to help people to fulfill upon their human potential. Financial freedom just happens to allow that to take place. It's going to increase the chances of that taking place, right?
Absolutely.
And it's a very similar mindset. So, for anyone that's out there that's, maybe they're in their 30s and they haven't gotten there, it's so important to not compare yourself to other people, but compare yourself to yesterday. Yep. Who you were yesterday. So do you have any suggestions for someone that's like really struggling with that? I'm not good enough. I can't do this. Well, that worked great for Omni and Steve, but I'm different. What do you suggest for them in terms of getting themselves out of their own way to take the action so that they can create another decade that's going to really change their life?
Yeah. So every time I'm in a funk, and I get in funks all the time, right? Everyone says, well, what are you talking about? You've achieved this, you've done this, but like I can go weeks or sometimes months not really understanding what I want to do with my life, which sounds crazy because I structure so much around my path, but it really comes down to always having a vision. And so if someone's like frustrated with where they are, it's probably because they don't have a clear vision of where they're going. And that's really what it comes down to. How do you structure your next 1 year, 2 year, 3 years of your life? The reason I wrote the book, The Cash Flow Breakfast Club, and put that plan in there was for someone to have a 6-year plan or a 10-year plan. Not to say that's the best plan out there, that's a plan, but at least you have a plan and you're saying, oh, I only bought 1 property this year. Oh, turns out my plan only requires me to buy 1 property. I'm on track. And if I bought 2, even better. Sure, someone else is buying 50 a year or 100 a year. That's not my plan. Once I graduate from this plan, I'm going to create a new plan. So there's a really good book called The Vivid Vision by Cameron Herold. And so that helped me. It's basically every 3 years you create a vision board, right? Or not really a vision board, but it's kind of a vivid vision of yourself 3 years from now at every aspect of your life, particularly your business, but you could go family and everything else as well. And I force myself to do that on a regular basis so that I can say, okay, what's so big out there? I don't even know how I'm going to get there, but that's my vision. That's the impact I want to make. And then how do I work my way backwards from there? And if you have that big enough vision, I call it the marathon goal, right? That we talked about earlier. You set a big marathon goal out there, and then you just say, okay, well, I set the goal. Now I just got to figure out what are the next logical steps to get there. Yeah,
that's really wise advice there. With creating compelling vision, because I think some people have that natural visionary tendency and other people really don't have that naturally. What would you suggest for someone that, is struggling? Obviously, like the book is helpful. What do you think is the best way to create your vision?
Yeah, that's a great point. Because not like I'm a visionary. Yeah, you might be a visionary as well.
It comes natural to us.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like,
and so it's
almost
hard
have to try to shut it down.
Exactly. And to be honest, sometimes we start the vision, but what I'm not good at is implementing everything across time. I'm really good at building businesses, and then I get bored, right? And that's a visionary, kind of tendency. Another great book is the Rocket Fuel. It's by Gino Wickman. Basically talks about the visionary and the integrator. Really, every great business, every great system, every great, no matter what it is, has two personalities behind it. Sometimes they're the same person, usually they're not, right? You have, Steve Jobs was an amazing visionary, but there's no way he would have done it by himself, right? He has Wozniak and a few other people that are completely different that were integrators behind him. So you may be an integrator and your why is connecting to another vision, right? You may have no interest in creating the own vision, right? You just want to be a part of something awesome that someone created. And integrators, amazing integrators, are very rare. So you just raise your hand and say, here's what I am. I'm the COO. I'm looking for the CEO of business or life, and you can help. I'm always looking for integrators, right? Because I'm a visionary with not enough integrators to implement what I'm trying to do.
So if someone takes there's actually a test. If you just Google Rocket Fuel Integrator Test online, you'll come up with an actual scoring system to see where you land. If someone is high on the integrator scale and they know they want to invest in real estate, but they don't know where to start, and let's say they maybe find a visionary that they really resonate with the vision, what would you suggest their approach be with that visionary?
Yeah. So as a visionary, and I'm glad you mentioned that test, and there's several great ones out there, but as a visionary, I want to build, I want to own things, right? So I'm always going to be hands-on. I'm going to be building the business. I'm going to be actively investing myself. From an integrator, not to say that they don't like to build, but that's less of a need for them. And so they might be part of someone else's syndication, part of your investing business, whatever it is. There are so many ways to get in investing where you don't actually need to be the one swinging the hammer or collecting the rent. Right? You can be a part of a bigger system. You just need to attach yourself to a visionary or a company that has the right visionary so that you can play the role. And often you're not stepping into that company as the COO. You're stepping into it as an analyst or something at a lower level. You're building your way up. I use Brandon Turner's from previous Bigger Pockets as an example all the time. Most of his high-level executives in his company right now started as interns, right? They started as interns, worked their way up to analysts, worked their way up to customer service, and now they're running this huge, syndication company. So you start somewhere, you find someone that inspires you, you say, I want to take this path, and then you just ride that path for as long as it makes sense for you. And it might not be forever. It might be 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, because you're going to have your limit at some point, but figure out what that is, and that will hopefully provide you purpose, but also help you with your real estate investing goals.
That's really good advice. And then just coming from my only addition to that is ask them what they need, right? Like come from a place like what's missing in your business. And then if you have strengths, like it has to be genuine, it has to be real. Like if you're not good with data and, analyzing deals, then, you're not really bringing any value, but maybe they have something that you are really good at that is missing from their business. So to know your strengths going into it, there's so many different ways to skin a cat in real estate. You don't have to do it on your own. There's nothing wrong with doing it on your own. Probably won't go as far as if you do it with others. What's been your experience? Because it sounds like you pretty much built your real estate portfolio initially very similar to a lot of investors, where it just graduated from smaller deals to bigger deals, and managing and maintaining the portfolio on your own. At what point did you know you needed to bring in additional help?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say my personal family portfolio, newly free developers, it's all personal inside me and my wife and my kids. That's all it is, right? So we have no outside investors, no outside anything. It's we use our own capital, our properties, buy properties. And I kind of pushed back against for much of my career, probably because my initial mentor didn't believe in the philosophy, but I pushed back from using, private money lenders excessively, bringing in partnerships, syndications. That was a whole different world for me. And I've said, you don't own that. And what I'm doing, I own, right? So what I realized was, but that limited me, limiting belief. We talked about that today on what I can do, right? Limited on the size or the impact. And there are some deals that you absolutely need partnerships with. You absolutely. And so my compromise was 2 different companies. Like my family company is always going to be in-house, and we're going to own everything our own. And we're going to continue to stack up small rental properties, small mid-sized portfolio. And that's what we do. And then we also have syndications, and we also have partnerships, and we also have joint ventures, and it's different than this company, and we focus on different things. And so that helped me get over a barrier and realize that's a business, and I'm helping other people grow wealth, where this is, I'm protecting my family. We're going to continue to grow this. And this is, if the world ends, this is what saves us, right?
Yeah. You have like your nest egg.
Yeah, absolutely.
Your plan A and then your plan B.
Yeah.
When a lot of people are getting started, I think they get really stuck on a few different things. I think fear gets in the way a lot. And then the next thing is they use information to avoid the fear. Like, so an example would be, I'm going to go out and look at these properties, and, here's my buy box. I need this criteria. As soon as a deal comes across that, is not exactly, there's one little thing, right? And they get in this analysis paralysis, and then they go look at the next deal and the next deal. What would you say to them? Because I'm huge on what is it going to take to get you off your couch, strike a deal, get started. And, because I know that's how I learned. It was like, you learn as you go. So what would you say when people get stuck in that analysis paralysis, and when then they have that fear mindset come in, like, what if this goes wrong? What if the heater goes?
Which is everyone, right? If you've never invested before, it's everyone. And really comes down to, let's take a landlord investor as having this conversation with Rob just before this. I tell people, if you want to buy 1 or 2 properties and that's it, don't ever do it. Like, no one should own 1 or 2 rental properties, because
it's a headache.
You're gonna get the headache, but you don't get the benefit. You are not financially free off of 1 or 2 residential rental properties. No one is. And so you have to think beyond that to get to that freedom before it actually makes sense. So you have to have the goal of it's 5 or 10 or 15 or whatever it is, and set out that plan. And that pushes you through a little bit further. And then I follow that up with your first property is going to suck. Like, no matter what, your first property is probably going to be your worst investment ever. You have to get it out of the way because you're a terrible investor. How could you be a good investor? You've never done it before. You're a terrible landlord.
First time at the gym.
Right?
First
exactly.
time running a marathon.
You have to be terrible before you can get better. You're terrible. You don't have the network yet, right? So, and people say, well, I just want to hold out for the better deals. The better deals found me once I was a better investor. Once I was a better landlord, once I owned a bunch of properties, guess what? Neighbors started to call me to sell me their properties because they knew me. That doesn't happen in the beginning. So you got to get past your first 1 or 2 average or mediocre deals that you're probably going to have a headache with, and push through to get to your 4th, 5th, 6th, 20th. And it starts to make sense from there. And
I've heard this saying, tell me if this rings true for you. Time heals all mistakes in real estate.
Yeah.
Like, and the example being, you could buy a property for $5,000 or $10,000 over market value, or above what your ideal purchase price would be. I would never say buy above market value unless you have crazy financing or something. Sure. But the concept is, over time, if you make a mistake and you weather the storm, you're not going to regret it, especially if you're in it for that 10, 20, 30-year period. So you have to look at your time horizon, and obviously the less time, the less, you have to take less risk in a sense. But has that rung true for you, where, some of these things that you thought were maybe catastrophic mistakes over time became really like amazing assets?
100%. I would say real estate is the most forgiving, and it is over time, and it is the long game. Not to say you can't benefit in the short game, right? With immediate cash flow, you're starting to benefit from that, but wealth is driven through really the market going up and the equities going up as well. If that's your only plan, then you're sitting there maybe holding the bag that you don't want to hold, and you're figuring out, can you hold it long enough to do that? But if you're buying cash flow and equity at the same time, then that cash flow is, sustaining you. So I will say every regret I have in real estate is around something I sold. Like, and
Me too.
at the time,
Me
it's
too, 100%.
right.
Yep.
It's like, man, why did I do that? Or I'm doing this, right? I had to sell at a loss because of whatever this is, right? Things happen. And then 5 years later, you're like, man, I shouldn't have even sold that. Like I was stressing over that $5,000 or a $10,000 error, and it should have been $100,000 win 5 years later. So if you have the ability to, and you have that foresight and the plan to wait it out.
And let me dive into that, because if my assumption is that if someone is investing in real estate, you have the long-term portfolio goal of, acquiring multiple rentals to get it to financial freedom. The number one reason that I've seen people sell is because they need immediate cash, or they think they need that cash, or that cash is just too enticing. Oh, I could sell it and make $100,000 when I'm only making $500 a month off this. What would you say to them in terms of shifting their mindset from taking the capital out of their deals versus finding new capital?
Yeah. If there's any possible way to keep your property. And I was a real estate broker for 20 years and real estate agent, and we made money helping people sell real estate. And I've talked so many people out of selling their properties, which is like bad business.
Counterintuitive, right? Yeah.
But it's like, why sell that? Why?
Yeah.
Like let's figure out a way to keep this and make your goal happen. Have I sold properties? Absolutely. I've sold properties where if I can trade this cash flow, $500 a month, and immediately, because I sold it, buy a better cash flow, and that was the quickest way to do that. And now I'm making $2,000 a month. Then I'll trade cash flow for cash flow. But other than that, I don't intentionally, sell property. So if there is a way now, if I don't sell it, I might lose a few properties. Then selling off one of them might be your solution in the short run. But figuring out what are the creative strategies. We had some lenders on the panel today.
Maybe paying a little higher interest for a bridge loan to get the deal, in the short term, so you can acquire another asset. Because every time you sell an asset, if that asset's actually a true asset, if it's a winner, keep it. If it's a loser, dump it. But if it's putting money in your pocket, then that's pretty simple. It's an asset. And why would you go backwards just to acquire another asset unless it's like last resort? Like if there's no other way to access capital, in my opinion, and still make the deal work.
So the other thing I see on that is, so I specialize the last handful of years, I buy what I call buy in bulk, right? I only buy portfolios. I rarely buy one-off properties anymore. So I try to find landlords that are tired, that are ready to exit, that have 10, 15, 20 properties that want to sell it all at one time. Because if they sold it one at a time, it'd take them a year or two. They got to juggle tenant schedules, because maybe they're going to sell the owner occupants and things like that. Maybe they have a portfolio loan across their entire portfolio, and it's harder to sell one at a time. So I buy the entire portfolio for them, allows them to exit. Because of that, I get a certain percentage discount that makes sense for me and makes sense for them. I don't typically want to keep everything that's in their portfolio, but I agree to buy it. So I typically try to just keep the multifamily. If there's a single family, then we might fix it up and we might sell it. But that's the strategy. And the reason so many people ask, well, why are they selling? If they're so great, why are they selling? Well, they didn't buy it with the same, there's two things there. It's typically mom and pops that are managing themselves that I buy from. So they bought themselves a job, and it was a well-paying job maybe for a while, but at some point they ran the numbers and say, we want to move to Florida, we want to move to the Outer Banks, and we got to hire somebody, and all the cash flow they thought they had didn't exist anymore. Right. So they basically boxed them in with a job. It didn't make sense. And they weren't raising rents because they're not professionals. And so they're just worried about having to get 20 new tenants in 1 year. And that's a nightmare for a mom and pop landlord. They just don't want to deal with it. Right. So they exit. We bring in professional management. We make sure that we're stabilized, and we slowly add value and get it up to market rent over a few years. But that's the most common portfolio exiting, landlord, is someone that's managing it themselves.
Yeah, and that sounds like an amazing strategy. And just to that point, you don't want to be that landlord 20 years from now that didn't plan your exit.
Sure.
Right? Because then you are selling it at a discount potentially. Maybe that is fine. Maybe that is your exit, but just be aware of it going into it. I know you talked about, having the exit strategy and, the accumulation. So anything else that, would you suggest for anyone, getting in the business, or maybe they're in the business and it's time for them to scale up? What do you recommend in terms of like their first steps?
Yeah. So obviously we're both from an agent investor world, right? You don't have to be a real estate agent or have a license to be an investor, but there's a huge advantage, right? And I would say so many agents don't take advantage of what that advantage should be. So if you're already an agent and you're getting into the investor side, then you got to find the right community. If I was in Pennsylvania, I'd be at your brokerage. Like, you provide an awesome.
And likewise,
Yeah,
I know you kind of exited that, but I'd probably be at the brokerage you exited.
Awesome community, right? Like-minded people. People are just understanding it's a different game. Like, everyone else is playing this game, you guys are playing a different game. So without that, you're going to go sign up and play a different game. Like, just understand which game you want to play. And the game that someone should be playing as a real estate agent is active income as a real estate agent to support their passive income habits. And if you have that community, that's all it really matters. So if I had to fast track my success, I would have found more mentors, more coaches, and be a part of more mastermind groups like this. And that would have elevated me at a faster level.
With all of my interviews on this podcast, that is the most consistent thing that everyone says. Surround yourself with the people that are doing it, right? Mentors, coaches, do it sooner than later. With that said, can you touch on your coaching program and your book and just how that could potentially help someone? Because I want to make sure that we don't leave anything on the table. If someone needs help, that they know how to reach out.
Yeah, appreciate that. So the book's called The Cash Flow Breakfast Club. I wrote it a handful of years ago, and it's when I was like helping my agents trying to become financially free and then helping their clients, go down this path. I wasn't a coach by any means, but I was helping people just do what I did because I knew it worked. So I was trying to say, do what I did. And so it became like a manual I wrote down every step, all my transactions, and I was teaching off of that. And eventually I said, my wife is really the one to help. So let's push it and get it published. We're going to help more people that way. The education event that we run is called the Cash Flow Breakfast Club as well. So we tell the story of the Cash Flow Breakfast Club in the book, and then we run the event. It originated in Northern Virginia, where I'm from, Loudoun County. We have a location in Hawaii. We have about 8 locations now that we're expanding to. And what we're trying to do is find like really awesome investors out there that want to give back, that want to build a community very similar to what you do already, and help them just go through the trial and errors that we went through and say, here's a format that works. Here's how you build a 100-person community. And you're going to, provide value to people just starting out or mid-level or even high-level investors for free. And in return, you're going to have an awesome community that is going to help you achieve your goals as well. Because that's what happens, right? So you tell people what you're looking for. And if you're helping them, they're going to try to figure out how to help you in return. So Cash Flow Breakfast Club, pretty excited. One of the reasons I retired, quote unquote, from my old gig was so that I can focus on expanding this full-time nationwide. And
that's amazing. That goes right back to where we started, which is the why.
Yep.
Why are you doing this? And I know it's coming from a place of helping free people. It's kind of like once you break out of prison and you have this feeling of financial freedom, your next thing you do is you're going back and chipping a whole way for other people to come through. And I see that that's what you're doing. So it's an amazing thing. Thank you for being on today. We're going to post all his info below so that you can reach out, and we appreciate your time. We hope you found this valuable.
It was awesome. Thank you for the invite. I'll come back every year if you guys hold. This is awesome.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning in to the Investor Agent Podcast today. We hope you found it valuable. Please tune in weekly at theinvestoragents.com.